In this four-part series of videos, I have made reference to a number of the books that I have here to build my arguments, and hopefully by now you have seen what the gist of this conversation is today, because I started by pointing out a number of happenings that I thought are important to this conversation. The BRICS Summit, the last BRICS Summit in Johannesburg, and the fact that a number of countries were invited to join the BRICS formation, including countries from Africa, Egypt and Ethiopia. Egypt, of course, is one of the big economies on the continent. Ethiopia is always touted as one of the fastest growing economies in the eastern horn of Africa. Before they joined, the only African country member of the BRICS was South Africa, which of course is prominent in that formation. So I've been able to revisit some of these books, Kwame Nkrumah, Tom Mboya, where they talk about the non-aligned movement. And I've also talked briefly about Dambisa Moyo's Winner Take All, China's Race for Resources and What It Means to Us. Dambisa Moyo is also the author of Dead Aid, a book that caused quite a bit of excitement when it was written a couple of years ago. The gist of my discussion has been to see how to make sense of all these happenings, the BRICS issue, the G20 issue, and so on. And I have presented about the non-aligned movement, which harks back to the origins of Cold War Part 1 in the 1950s. And this is important in this discussion because I'm posing the question whether, in fact, if at all Brett's thesis about a new Cold War holds water, then the conversations about alignment and non-alignment could indeed become central to conversations on international relations today as we go on. My bigger concern is, of course, the place of Africa in those conversations. Now, it really depends on where you stand with this. Is Brett saying a Cold War between China and the USA is coming, or it's already here with us? When you look at these developments, the AU becomes a permanent member of the G20. G20 countries are rich countries. That's not a club for the AU with its current, the plethora of problems facing African countries. So you must deconstruct this. Why? I'm a trained journalist, and I've also studied international relations. So that inquisitive, of course, I also studied philosophy in my earlier years. So I encourage you to ask the why question. Every time something happens, ask the why question. This is about the future of the world, but it's also about the future of the African continent. The African continent has been going through this integration process. And I've talked before about Pan-Africanism, regional integration, and security as sort of the three key pillars upon which a new African development trajectory can be constructed. So that I've discussed in my last video. So when you ask yourself whether these movements are going to elevate Africa's agency, whether these movements are going to make Africa a bigger and more significant player in the self-help international system, that is where the debate for me must start. Okay? Because our leaders have also been grumbling and complaining that they are called into all this manner of summits, but nothing seems to come out of them. As I keep saying, Africa is still just where it is. It isn't rising. It's facing major challenges. One could argue that, African states, African countries now enjoy a larger pool of middle class. Then again, the class debate in Africa, of course, is always camouflaged by many other things. But many of the middle classes in Africa are a paycheck away from poverty, my friends. So what really does it mean? What does it mean? What do these two, the BRICS, the G20 and so on, what exactly do they stand for in terms of African progress? Are they increasing Africa's agency, or are they in fact limiting it? Are they in fact putting Africa into the same Cold War pockets that Africa was put in from the 50s coming forward, and where Africa as a whole and African nations specifically have never been able to extricate themselves? What does it really mean? Is it a new scramble for Africa? Is it in fact only about resources, and hence we may want to look at Dambisa Moyo, winner take all, a little more keenly, a little more carefully? Is it about resources? Is it simply repositioning? Are the other big powers simply trying to do a catch-up with China, which seems to have gobbled up a lot of these resources? We need to understand all these things, because the future of Africa depends on it. The kind of decisions that are made depend on it. Are we going into another non-aligned mode? And what exactly does it even mean? Because we know that African leaders in the 50s and 60s and 70s were not non-aligned. They were aligned. And of course, they tended to play the East and the West. Ethiopia is a very good example of that kind of Cold War games that were played back then. So, ladies and gentlemen, where is the continent headed? Can the continent extricate itself from this possible coming tragedy of alignment and emerge as a world power itself? Those are the questions I would want you to reflect on. Those are international relations questions. Those are realism questions. It's a self-help world. The world continues to be characterized by anarchy, the absence of a single authority to impose order. So in this orderlessness, where is Africa going from the year 2023 going forward. Ladies and gentlemen, that's the end of my 4-part video series today. We will see you in the next conversations. Thank you.